Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my top 5 books that I've read this winter. You guys seem to really enjoy the last time I did a top 5 like this for the fall, so here I am with another seasonal top 5. I will be doing the same thing for the movies that I watched this winter, so look forward to that in my next video. And as always, everything I talk about here is going to be linked in the info box below. Let's get into the books. So starting this countdown, at number 5, I have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy, and actually the first book that I finished in 2018. I considered putting the entire Southern Reach trilogy at number 5, but then I thought, you know what? I'm going to pick my favorite book out of the 3, which was this one, and I did review the entire trilogy on my channel. This is a weird nature type sci-fi horror novel with an expedition of 4 female scientists going into a mysterious Area X where nature has kind of taken over and is doing some strange things. This has a wonderful sci-fi horror atmosphere that is fascinating and creative, but also quite unsettling. And I think this creepy, disturbing atmosphere and the way the author described this bizarre area with everything that goes on there was my favorite thing about this book. The way he describes strange nature in his novels is just so unique and so vivid. You can really imagine the place that he's talking about, and you can just be so uncomfortable reading this because this just comes to life in front of your eyes as you're reading. While this may not have been a perfect novel, particularly because it leaves the reader with a ton of questions that you may or may not get answers for, and this does have some sci-fi horror tropes in it, this still is something that absolutely stands out to me, and I would recommend this to any fan of sci-fi horror or anyone who is interested in reading some strange alien nature type stuff. At number 4, I have Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. You may remember me talking about this in my February wrap-up, and I knew this was going to be in my top 5 before I finished this novel because the writing here is very, very gorgeous and very emotional and very poetic. This one is based on a true story, and it describes the final days of the last woman to be executed in Iceland as she awaits her execution at this remote farm. This is definitely the type of book you have to be prepared for, you have to be mentally ready for, and you have to be in the mood for. And sometimes it can be hard to get in the mood for something that sounds this depressing, but I promise you this is 100% worth reading. It's an unusual story. It really shows you some interesting perspectives, as well as it introduces you to a setting that you wouldn't normally encounter. This also challenges your perception of certain things. I can tell you from my experience that I started this book and I felt very uncomfortable because of how the author was trying to make me feel about this whole situation, but my attitude towards all of this definitely transformed as I got further and further into the novel and as I got the entire picture. I will tell you that if you do take a chance on this and you do start reading it, you will not be able to put it down because you will want to get the entire story. You will want to know as much as you can about this, and there is a lot of research that went into this, so you can definitely tell how much work was put into this book. It is beautiful, it is sad, it is haunting, and it's not something that you're going to forget. At number 3, I have The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and you may remember me talking about this in my top 10 books of 2017 video. This was the last book that I read in 2017, and it was an excellent one. If the cover looks a little bit unfamiliar to you, it's because this is the Russian edition of this novel, but basically it's this book. I'm sure you've seen it around BookTube. This one is about a Korean woman who suddenly decides to become a vegetarian based on something she saw in her dream. And the whole novel is focused on how this decision affects not just her, but her family and people around her. She is actually never the narrator of the story. The story is told through 3 different perspectives of people who are close to her, which makes this very, very interesting. I did not expect it to be that way, but it was fascinating to read. This is a very unusual novel, and despite how short it actually is, the author manages to pack so many interesting discussions and themes into this one. I am a little bit surprised by how many people view it through the mental illness lens, and they see this as the main theme of the book. I do believe that the main themes of the book are nonconformity and trying to live up to someone else's expectations and just being done with that. A lot of this also has to do with misunderstanding and with how sometimes people can have the best intentions, but they want to help you in a way that they want to help you. They don't actually want to understand the kind of help that you personally need. It is a novel that doesn't offer a definite answer. It doesn't really paint anything as the right or wrong way to do things. It's all kind of up in the air, and it leaves the reader with a lot to think about, and that is something that I really appreciated about this book. And also the writing was absolutely gorgeous, even though I did read this in Russian, so I can't really speak for the English translation. As far as what I've read from the English translation, which I did read the first few pages, the writing there is also very, very beautiful. At number 2, I have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is a dystopian classic, which I am sure most of you are familiar with. We have our main character who is a fireman, except for in this future, firemen don't really put out fires anymore because that's not really a problem. They actually set things on fire. Also, books are not allowed. And what happens here is that he starts questioning everything he knows and everything he has been taught, and potentially realizing that maybe things are not as he thought they were. This book is incredibly relevant to this day, and this is the kind of future that is a little bit scary because you can easily see something like that happening. Not exactly like this, but something very similar. Ray Bradbury obviously expresses a lot of concern for our future and for where we are going with our obsession with entertainment and fun and kind of easy, carefree living. And it is a very exaggerated and kind of twisted presentation of what that can turn into, but that doesn't mean it's not relevant, and it is going to make you consider certain things and see parallels with stuff that goes on in our daily lives so many years later after this has been written. So I did love how relevant this ended up being. I did not expect that to be the case. Something else that I found pleasantly surprising was that this novel actually wasn't as bleak as it may sound from the premise. Yes, the future presented here is not a fun one. You don't want to live in it, and even though the goal of this whole situation is making people happy, if you've read the book, you know what I mean, they didn't really go about it the best way. However, you don't come out of reading this book thinking, oh my gosh, everything's gonna be terrible, this is depressing. No, you actually see it from the author's perspective, and you see it as this pretty bad thing that could potentially turn out to be a stepping stone to something better. So that's definitely something I enjoyed. Basically, this is a classic for a reason. If for some reason you haven't read it like me and you've waited this long, pick it up. And at number 1, you may have guessed it if you've seen my February wrap-up, but it is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This book is just as wonderful as people say it is, and it made me feel so many things, for the lack of a better word. This is essentially a coming-of-age story of a young girl who is growing up in Nazi Germany, particularly during World War II, and this is narrated by Death. Yes, it's narrated by Death, and it is quite uncomfortable to be spoken to by Death in this book. But also, this narrator is one of the best things about this novel, because the voice of the narrator is so unique and so quirky and so interesting. I loved the way the author approached this story, and it is not an easy task because this could have easily turned out to be gimmicky or could have felt exploitative of a real life tragedy, but it was none of these things, and it was a wonderfully written historical fiction book that also told a coming of age story from a unique perspective. It was a really good balance of just normal human storytelling, but also something that didn't shy away from the horrors of war. Do not be intimidated by the size of this novel. It looks huge. It looks like it's going to take you forever to get through this, but the way certain things in these chapters are printed, they take up half a page and it takes you 15 seconds to read it. So don't be intimidated by the size. It's not going to take you as long as you think, and even if it did, it would be worth it because this is just brilliant. I obviously recommend all 5 books that I mentioned today, but this one is easily my favorite. So that's it for my top 5 books that I've read this winter. As you can tell, my winter favorites have been quite an emotional experience. Let me know if you had the same thing happen to you. I guess I was just feeling all of the sadness and darkness in my reading. I don't know what happened, although I generally lean towards books like that. I wonder if that will change in the spring though, because I'm definitely feeling some fantasy after all of this. Let me know what your favorite reads of this winter were. I would love to know, so leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, all of that. I hope you guys are having an awesome day, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!